really, do you like it that way or do you like it that way?
Are we good? Okay. Greg says we're good. So I will call the June 8th, 2020 school board meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Anita Jagosinski, if you would do the roll call, please.
Chris Lau.
Here.
Rebecca Reber.
She is not here yet, so.
Barb Wetstein.
Here.
Brian Wopat.
Here.
Trenton David Huseman.
Here.
Gary Dunlap.
Here.
Carol Hancock.
Here.
And I am here.
Okay, with 6 of the 7 school board members present, I would declare a quorum. Approval of the agenda. I would note that the agenda has been printed, distributed, and sent to the local media. With this in mind, are there any changes?
I'd like to propose that we move item 7.3 to move it up on the agenda to present it first.
Sure. Is that okay? Any other changes? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Anita, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. And then public participation, we do not have anyone here this evening. So then reports and discussion. And so then we will go to return to school planning. Dr. Mueller.
Hi there. I am going to share my screen with you. Here. All right. Let's see here. I'll make this a little. Wow. Did I have to make it bigger before I share? Can you see this okay, or should I redo it? Here, just a second. Let me. See, this is the problem. Oh, God. Sorry, 1 second. I can't.
We can, if we don't need to see them, if.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I just can't share my screen unless I, okay, we'll just do this. Okay. Hopefully on your screen, are you seeing it says return to school scenarios? Okay. So tonight, what I'd like to share with you is just how the district has been approaching planning for the returning to the 2021 school year. We did present a video and shared that out to all of our families and staff about a week ago in that, and just wanted to update you on some of that information. So here we go. Here we go. Okay. So with that, what this shows is that there are multiple scenarios that we are planning for. And I'm just going to start in the blue box, box A. So what that is the favorable scenario is that we would just return to school as normal as before COVID-19 even occurred. So that is scenario A. Scenario B would be that all of our students come back to school, but then we have social distancing and some safety precautions that we have in place. This could include new schedules, different procedures, intermittent attendance days, just to keep to a certain amount of students in certain areas and so on. But you notice in this case, some families may need distance learning still. And then scenario C, school would open for some students with significant social distancing and safety precautions. This is where we would have to prioritize. And then scenario D is what we had happen this past spring where everyone was on distance learning and no one was on site. Another part that could happen, but it doesn't sound like there's, at least as a district, and there hasn't been much talk, is a new attendance calendar could be mandated by the DPI and adopted by the district, but that is not in the works, and there is nothing happening with that at this time. Now, the big part about this is what's going to be new in our world next year, is we can switch between these models at any point in time. So the next question comes to, well, what does that look like if we can't, it's not like we're going to come back and stick to one of these scenarios. It's going to be interchanging and switching throughout the school year. So with that, I'm going to show you, well, how are we going to do that? Well, how will we know which scenario we're in? We're working very closely with La Crosse County. They have what's called the COVID-19 Compass. So this is the way that we plan to communicate with our families. This is this uses local data in La Crosse County, and it assesses the risk in La Crosse County. They use 3 categories to track their data. You can see here, epidemiology. In other words, what is the disease doing? Is they keep a track on that. Healthcare capacity and public health capacity. So they monitor these 3 categories of data very closely. And then what they do is every Wednesday they update their compass. And their compass, you see, has red, which is severe risk. And I'm going to show you how this aligns to our actual scenario planning. They have orange, which we've been in for a while now, or last couple of weeks, is high risk. They have yellow, which is moderate risk, and green is low risk. So I'll show you how this compass can align to our scenario planning and what we've been doing. When it comes to K-12 schools, La Crosse County then even goes into more details as to what does this look like. If the compass is red, this is saying we must go into distance learning. So that would mean, so it's almost like we're going to be checking snow days every week almost. So our kids going to be able to come into our buildings. Well, if there's a severe risk and it's red, we might have to say, all right, we're going to have to be home with distance learning. In a high risk or orange, we'll be able to have students on site, but we're going to have to keep it around or less than around the number of 15 students. And I'll talk a little bit more detail as to what
15 students per classroom?
Yep. So we've been working with the county and having calls with them now. And what we're doing is we're working actually collaboratively with the county and all of the schools in La Crosse County. And we're working on certain protocols as a group to make sure we have some consistency across the county. So we started the discussion, well, what does this, no more than 15 students look like? And that doesn't mean 15 students in the school. We're looking at more of our social distancing of 6 feet. So in the classroom you have in the school, are you able to social distance how many kids within 6 feet of that space? That's what that's looking more like. Which then brings up, I'll show you on the next slide, which other questions come up. And then the moderate risk or yellow, that's where gatherings of greater than 50. So I think of courses like our band or choir where you have large groups of students. That's where they might have to have a different kind of instructional model initially, but once we get to yellow, they can go back to how they instructed originally. And then low risk or green is we're back to school as norm. So these are some things we've been talking about and considering is, the big thing is our communication plan. How do we communicate effectively and quick enough with our staff and families so they know what scenario are we in and what's happening? We're working on student symptom screening. That will be something that's new and will be happening is we will have to screen our students. You did see the plan for staff symptom screening. That's happening right now. Every staff fills out a survey before they come to work every day. There's some new cleaning protocols in place and working further on that. We're assessing what kind of PPE do we need? who all needs masks and when and where will they need to wear them and so on. And there's lots of discussion with the county on that. Where do we need plexiglass? Where do we need floor markers? There's lots of pieces to this that we're working with the county on. And then we talked a little bit about instructional models, lunch and busing. These are all pieces that we're considering. How is this going to look? Because our goal is we want to bring every student back to school on that first day in the fall. And in talking with the county, if we have a good plan, it's very possible that we're going to be able to do that, even if we're in the orange. You know, and definitely we're going to have training for our staff around these new safety protocols and then with our students. For example, students are going to learn, oh, we're going to go wash our hands again. All right, we're going to wash our hands before we do this. You know, there's just going to be new protocols that and training going on. And then we're going to have to take a look at our policies to make sure they're aligned. And what do we do when visitors come? You know, so these are just a few of many things that we're considering right now and having conversations around. So how this all goes together, this is that same picture that I had shared at the very beginning of the slideshow, but this shows using our La Crosse County Compass, how it aligns. So scenario A, that is our green or the low risk where we're functioning as normal. Then we have our yellow, which is our moderate risk. And when the compass is yellow, we can have larger groups of students gathering in spaces in our buildings. And then when it's orange, we can still have students in the building, but they're going to have to be in smaller groups. And what does that look like? And, you know, and we're working on, okay, what does lunch look like when you're in the yellow versus the orange? You know, how does that look for students? What does it look like on the bus? And then D is our distance learning, where if we have a positive case in our school and the health department says, you know, you need to close your school for a few days, we'll have to treat it almost similar to like a snow day, but have distance learning over that time period. One thing that we are working on and having conversation around is to offer families that are not feeling safe to return to school. So say, I'm not feeling comfortable. I don't want my student to come to school because I'm feeling not safe because it's still during the pandemic. To allow them to still remain in the district, but have that online learning, we're working with surrounding districts to provide a total virtual online option for these families. And that is in the process of discussion and happening currently at this point in time. So that is an overview of the return to school planning. That was a lot. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
So what questions might you have?
So if when everyone returns, if PPE is required, will the district be providing it?
Yeah,
Or how does that work?
Yeah, if we're requiring PPE, we will have to provide that. There's discussion, especially around masks, because there might be a certain type of mask that the county's saying is required. So we're waiting for more guidance on what that looks like so that we're able to provide those pieces.
Okay,
of,
and then a follow-up question, has there been talk, I'm not sure what all the bathrooms look like in all of the buildings, but is there any talk about making sinks, soap dispensers, and paper towel dispensers automatic, so to you know, not, you know, some of the kid faucets I know, like they have to hold them down. I don't know if there are any of those still in the district, but yeah, just so that they're not just cross contamination while washing hands.
Yeah, that's a good point, Barb. We'll add that to our list of things to consider. I know we still even have in some, I don't know if we have, a lot of them I know we have switched where you put your hands under it and the water comes out, but yeah, where do we have it where they're touching sinks and then someone else is coming in? And if there is, if we aren't able to get that switched on time, what's the protocol for that? That's a good point. Yeah.
Other questions?
Can I ask about just like punching in their lunch number, something like that?
Actually, Mr. Gasper right now is investigating an app that students could use from their devices to actually put in their lunch orders so that there wouldn't be any lunch configuration back and forth. So you're hitting it right on the button as to the different things that we're investigating and looking at to alleviate people touching things, people coming in contact with each other and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And you said you're investigating that online virtual. So for students, I know one family, for example, the child is a diabetic, and so they're concerned about that. They feel they're at risk. And so, you know, they may be one of those families that chooses to stay virtual. But what if we have so many of those families that we could actually just go it on our own? Are we looking at that as a possibility, that we may have enough, and maybe it's not enough sixth graders, but maybe it's between sixth and seventh grade, you know, there's enough.
So right now we're in discussion, and the discussion is around, we aren't sure what kind of interest there's going to be in that. So the first year, just seeing what our interest level is and staffing that upon how many are from your district to help in that matter. And that's why think it's important to do a collaborative at this point with that. And who knows, it could grow into our own online eventually. But at first we're thinking, even for fiscal reasons also, it'll be important to collaborate and to get, we want staff and staff trained well in some of our, our teachers, unfortunately, we're just kind of thrown, like, you're going to do online learning next week. So this online school, we want it to be, this is something that a teacher really enjoys, likes to do, and wants to teach in that manner, versus being kind of thrown into doing that without the proper training. So.
And it might surprise you how many families want to send their kids. We surveyed at our school, and we had 85% say if we start in mid-July, they want to send their children. And so it may vary a lot district to district or school to school, but we might not be able to anticipate what the response is, Yep.
Oh, and one thing I should mention, the virtual we're looking at is K-8 initially. Yeah.
And then can I ask about staff? So we also know we have staff that, well, I think you and I had chatted about over 65 or whatever that haven't retired yet and or may have some health kind of issues. Are we looking at possibly they might be the ones to help deliver some of that virtual? If they're educators, I'm just looking at HEA, but I know it will trickle down to
Yeah,
other.
we'll have to work with, we've been working on individual cases with all our staff to determine what the best way for them to continue to do their job as best as they can at this point in time. But yeah, definitely that might be advantageous for some of them. Yeah.
Barb, are they doing year-round school in Crosse? Are they?
When the county moved to orange, that means we can open, but it could change at any point, so it's just watching the colors of the county to see what the restrictions would be. But as of now, July 15th will be day one for Northside and Hamilton.
Okay. Yeah, I know the numbers this last week have not been very good. There's been cases every day, whereas we hadn't seen that. So it will be interesting to see. And we had 2 hospitalizations today. So it'll be interesting to see if that affects the numbers at all.
Yeah.
Or the colors.
Yeah. Yep.
More questions?
Chris, I have a quick question. Do you have a cutoff date by which you're going to try to share the information or the decision that you make to parents? Because I know it's going to change week by week, but it'd be kind of crazy if it's the week before school and all of a sudden things change.
So as far as what scenario we're in?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So what my plan is at this point, and we're still working on it, is to have the compass right on the front of our website page and communicated daily through our Facebook. So they actually only update the compass on Wednesday each week. So it's more or less going to be a week by week, so parents can plan. The only time it would move to a closure where it might be a next day is if the county tells us we have to shut down. Just like, there's been past where there's been an influenza breakout in an elementary school, and the county comes in and says, all right, you need to do these measures before you can reopen. And I want to say we're very fortunate that we have the equipment and the staffing where when that's happened in the past, when I've been here, we've been able to open that next day. But with the COVID-19, a lot of times they like the 72 hours at least outside of the building for your staff and students. So we'll have to abide by the county's direction in those cases.
So will we though make a decision like in August, late August, unless it changes, this is what we're gonna do?
Oh,
moving
definitely. No, definitely. Yeah.
forward? And I just lost my question. Anybody else have a question? Rebecca, is that you?
Yep.
Yay, let's make sure we mark her present.
Yeah.
Okay, all
All
right,
right.
thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of
Then-
good questions.
Yes, then moving on to recommendation for facility use. Mark
Okay.
and Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, I will start. I'm just going to kind of speak initially. So we, as we're aware, so school closed, we got the notification on March 13th. I'm just going to take you back a little, that schools were going to be closed starting on March 18th through April 6th. That was the first notice of this. Then emergency orders 12 and 28 came out, which ultimately extended the closure of school facilities through June 30th of 2020. And then there was the whole overturning of the safer at home, but that did not include our school closures of our facilities. So our school facilities remain closed until June 30th. So tonight, what I'm bringing forth is a recommendation and time for us to have some discussion with the board as to what we would like our plan to be starting July 1st for school facility use, because that is when the orders will be lifted. So with that in mind, according to our board policy 830, community use of facilities, we want to be a community partner and we want to encourage community groups to use district facilities on temporary basis for worthwhile purposes. When the use wouldn't interfere with our district programs. But also in that policy, it says we need to consider safety as a primary concern for our facility users. So with those things in mind, we developed some guidelines that we were thinking would work to still allow our community partners to use our outdoor and indoor facilities, but with specific guidelines. So the guidelines we're proposing is one, priority would be given to requests for the purpose of district academic programs and providing an essential function to the community such as childcare. For example, our summer school academics, if we decide to bring some students back towards the end of summer school and are able to do some remedial or some academic work with some students to catch them up, we want to be able to do that. And also we have our YMCA childcare happening in some of our elementaries, which is important for families to be able to function. So we wanted to have that as a priority. Then we would adhere to the recommendations from the Crosse County Health Department using the Compass to determine whether facility use is allowable under the current situation. So in other words, if the Compass is red, we would not allow facility use. But if it's orange, then we could allow it under certain conditions, and yellow, a larger group, and so forth. Then the group requesting the facility use, we would ask that they submit their approved plan from the La Crosse County Health Department. We know many of our organizations in the community have gone forth to get their plans approved by the health department. And then the groups would be required to sign an assumption of risk agreement before the use. This is a recommendation by our insurance carrier. And then they would also meet the other requirements of our board policy already in place of 830, including proof of them providing their liability insurance. And then that, like we mentioned, if the Compass were to turn red, that we would have the right to deny use of the facility at any point during the COVID conditions. So that is the general overview. That was a lot to take in. And I know Mark has been working on, so outside organizations will come in and a lot of them will have their plans and we'll ask them for those and go through our process. But other groups that will be asking to use our indoor facilities are some of our own district programs, or they're groups that want to use it for open gyms and so on. So Mark's been working on, and I wanted him to share tonight just quickly if he could share his screen and kind of share what kind of process he's going through and what he's been working on.
Sure. So what we're trying to do is be proactive and provide information to both non-school district groups that are going to be using our facilities and district groups that use our facilities on a regular basis. The Compass provides a great structure for us and a general overview of what should be happening, but it doesn't give specifics for an individual group that are really easy maybe to follow. And so the thought is, how do we communicate with our community users and our district groups what they should be doing and how they should be preparing based on what color we're in with the La Crosse County. So I've created 2 different Google Sheets, one for just general facility users and one for co-curricular activities to try to help people start to process and think through those things. So let me share the community facilities used spreadsheet, Google Sheet that we have. Let's see. Maybe.
Oh.
I'm having a hard time bringing that up for some reason.
Do you have the share screen at the bottom, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let's see. Come up now?
Yep, it's coming. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so this is the Google Sheet for facility users in general. What I have across the top are the Compass colors and the low risk all the way up to extreme risk. And then the first grouping of descriptions that you'll see in here are general descriptions that would fit for any type of group. So these are things that we would want to be doing no matter what kind of group we are in the color associated with the La Crosse County. As you go down, the groups are broken up then more specifically into first groups with children with a children focus. So for example, the YMCA surround care. What will those color distinctions look like when we're both inside a building and outside a building? And how should we be talking with people about what should be going on with that particular organization under the color that the La Crosse County Health Department has issued? Going down, we've got Park and Rec trying to do the same thing. DECA, Booster Club tournaments. You can see many, many groups that we allow to use our facilities that we're trying to be proactive. And really this is twofold. I'm trying to be proactive in the sense I want to have time to think through obstacles and problem solve how we can make things work depending on what color they are. But also I'm going to be reaching out to the groups and saying, all right, here's where our restrictions are in the different colors. I want you to be proactive and come up with ways you can use our facilities given these restrictions. So give them time to process and think about how is it that we are going to be able to keep doing something positive for kids given that the restrictions that we're under during that particular time. So we've got lots of groups that impact kids directly. We've got groups that are more adult-based groups that we'll look at as well. And then we also have mass public gatherings that we'll look at and try to decide when and how those groups can access our facilities. So we're trying to go through each of these major areas and problem solve and be proactive.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep. Do we need to see the co-curricular one, or do we think we have the idea behind it?
Laura, would you like to see it, or do you feel you understand it?
It's set up very similarly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're getting head shakes. Yes, they understand it.
So, yeah, so the idea is, like you saw, Dancing with the Sports Stars. How can we make that possibly happen this next school year, depending on where we might be on the compass? You know, so thinking ahead and start the planning now with those types of activities.
So have we had a lot of requests for summer for July 1st, or what is that looking like?
Yes, we are starting to have a number of requests for July 1st. We've actually had a number of requests for June as well, but I've had to explain to them that things are not open until July 1st. And I expect that if things do open up like we're planning, we will see a lot of people using our facilities at that time, particularly the outdoor ones.
So the outdoor in groups where they may have to do additional cleaning, are they responsible for that cleaning? And then are they also responsible for those costs, or how is that going to be done?
Yeah.
That's a good question, Cheryl. I'm coming up with a memorandum of understanding that goes through some of the things we would expect an organization or group to do. And one of the things is, you know, our custodial staff does a great job of cleaning and making our facilities look nice, but they're not really disinfecting our facilities. They're not really capable of doing that and keeping up with the amount of groups using our facilities. So one of the pieces of that memorandum is for the group to clean before they use the facility and then clean once they're done. So hopefully putting a little bit of the burden of taking care of the facilities on the organization itself.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really great, because that's what we're doing at Cooley for our in-person meetings as well. And they're very happy to do it. They're just very happy to be able to be in person again with other people. So.
May I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So what happens if there's an individual with COVID who comes into the school from an outside organization? What happens then, I guess?
Well, that'll be part of our memorandum of understanding, that they need to notify us. And we're just actually developing our protocol where an outside organization would be in touch with Jill Mason. And then Jill would work with them and the health department to determine what our next steps are. Because we just want to ensure that, you know, we need to determine who did they come in contact with, and who. Now, the health department itself will do the tracing and contact those individuals that it needs to. But we want to ensure that we're notified of that so that we can protect our own staff, and then also do the cleaning protocols that would be needed if that would happen.
So are we including the protocol of doing the temperature like they do, where they take the temperature as people are entering the building or entering the use?
So in most of the La Crosse County plans, they're requiring that of those organizations. So that's one of the things that Mark I noticed it was on his sheet, and we'll be looking for that they are monitoring that.
But it's the asymptomatic that are the hardest. And so
right.
If, as Barb said, if someone came in, was asymptomatic, played ball or did whatever, and then 2 days later is tested positive, do we have, because I think we would want to do some extra cleaning then, and
Most
that
definitely.
should be on the
It would
cost
be-
of the organization.
It would be
I think.
required. That's what that MOU is going to have to be for. The other part that I want to mention, just to have that publicly stated too, is when it comes to indoor use, we're going to have to be very selective at this point in time and prioritize, because we have to stay within our guidelines. And we want to be careful because we don't want to put ourselves in a predicament where we're not able to start school in the fall because we allowed too much use in the summer. So we're being very careful about the amount of use and what the use is for. For example, we want, like we said, our academic programs to get priority, childcare, and then we'll probably have some high school teams that do their open gyms to prepare for their seasons. And if that's happening, and other surrounding districts are doing that, that would be something that we would be looking into also. So that's kind of where we're looking more for the indoor use at this point in time.
I think that's wise to be as cautious.
Okay.
Any comments, questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's Rebecca. Has there been anybody in charge or anybody looking into obtaining PPE or the chemicals that we're going to be using to clean? It's been kind of difficult to obtain certain things.
Yeah, John Daly, actually, we happened to purchase all of this before the COVID because
Okay.
we're in the process of purchasing disinfecting systems for our wrestling area, which have
Okay.
become very useful for the rest of us throughout the district. But John, I've checked with him and he said, because we didn't donate our supplies knowing we were going to need them at the start of school. So he says we are in good shape right now with what we have, but we're closely looking and monitoring. And that's the other part we have to consider with indoor use is we have to be careful because we're going to need product because we want to make sure we can bring kids back to school and have them here during the school day and have the cleaning supplies we need to continue that. So good point, Rebecca. Thank you.
And hand sanitizer is still hard.
Yeah. Oh,
Any other questions? Good discussion. Okay.
yeah.
And this will be on the guidance will be on the consent agenda the 22nd.
Yeah.
Okay. Then moving on to 7.2 summer school. Kim.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm here to provide you with a summer school update. So even though school just ended for us, we are already ready to dig into summer school. In fact, our high school programs are going to be leading us off, leading the way already with our first session starting tomorrow. They're running two sessions, running the first June 9th through July 12th, July 2nd. So the first is June 9th to July 2nd, the second being July 20th to August 12th. All of the sessions will run online using our Canvas LMS or Play-Doh, depending on the course that students are enrolled in. All of our courses will either be for credit recovery or to keep our students on track for graduation. Then that takes us into our middle school program. All of these classes, they start a little bit later with a starting date of July 20th and will run through August 6th. These will run in the morning. We'll continue to have our usual ELA, math, and enrichment courses. Those will be offered online using Canvas this year, like we did at the end of this school year. And then pending state guidance at the time, seeing as that will be closer to the end of July, we are hoping to bring small groups of students on site for either face-to-face or a blended learning environment, starting with a very small group of students that we have that participate in a mandatory summer school course. And then we'd also like to look at potentially bringing back some small groups of our music students as well. And that would pertain to the high school as well. That would be middle school and high school. And again, pending state guidance. And then with that, we would be working with Matt Myers, who is our supervisor of student services, who would be working with us on the guidelines to make sure that we do that safely. Finally, we have our elementary school programs. So those will run the same as our middle school program. The bulk of them rather, will run July 20th to August 6th. Those will be in an online format. So what's kind of exciting about this one is our elementary students will be able to try out the new online systems that we have been dabbling in a little bit this last spring, and now we will invest in them more fully starting this summer, and we'll have good use of them before we come into this fall with them. So all of those students will participate reading and math and enrichment lessons. And then we do have one small group of students. This is our Ready, Set, Learn crew, which are our students who are entering 4K. And again, pending state guidance, if we're able to, we'd really like to bring this group of students on site into their respective buildings to start preparing for what it's like to be a kindergartner in their schools. So lots the same, but also a lot of updates this summer just based on where we're at with COVID and planning proactively. Any questions about summer school?
Any questions?
Yeah, so I'm actually taking government starting tomorrow online. And I'm assuming, since facilities don't open up until the 30th, I'm assuming it's all going to be online because it's usually a hybrid class, but I'm assuming all
Right.
online.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. That's one actually that's had more experience being, like you said, it was a hybrid class where we've run blended the last couple of years. So this will be its full first time being full out online. So
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
yep, absolutely, sounds good.
Any other questions?
For the elementary kids, will we be providing them technology, or will that be dependent upon the families to have that?
We'll be working with we are not set up one-to-one at this time, but those families who are needing assistance with either devices or connectivity, will be working through those in a case-by-case basis.
Good question. Anything else? All right, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And then next item is preliminary budget. Julie.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Wish I got all the answers on this one. So I'm presenting this evening the 2021 preliminary budget, and we'll go through I'll share my screen, and it'll look very familiar to those that have been on the board in the past, but of course there's a lot of uncertainty, so we'll talk through some of that. In our budget development calendar, this preliminary budget would have already been presented, but as you know, it's really challenging to even bring this forward at this time because of all the uncertainty. So I'll share, first just going to share the issue paper and speak to that a little bit, and then a presentation on the summary budget in DPI format and talk about that a little bit. So as you are aware, we typically bring forward budget input variables in November and December every fall for the following fiscal year. So this did occur on December 16th of 2019. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the individual variables have been adjusted to prepare this budget. I have about 8 scenarios going right now, and so I'm bringing you one of 8, and I'll list all the assumptions within the budget that's coming forward for you this evening. There is great uncertainty, not just in our state, but across the nation on school funding and what funding will look like in the finances of school districts in 2021 and the closer years beyond 2021. So I've listed in the issue paper a number of bullet points on assumptions that are included in this budget. I'm just going to review those for your understanding. So I would say that this preliminary budget is conservative, but it is not as conservative as we may choose to be going forward. And by that, I am using the current level of pupil per pupil category. I use the current level of the revenue limit per pupil. Now this was supposed to go up $179 next year in 2021. So the preliminary budget is using the 1920 per pupil revenue limit rather than the increase. Next year was also supposed to see an increase in special education aid reimbursement from the state from about 26% to 30%, and the preliminary budget is using the more conservative current level of special education reimbursement. The next couple of things have to do with the equalization aid formula. The low revenue limit ceiling was supposed to go from 9,700 to 10,000, and this has to do with the equalized property value per pupil in your district. So that was going to go up, which increases aid to districts, and the secondary aid guarantee was supposed to go from 1,357,000 to 1,453,000. Again, that's the property value in equalization property value per pupil. So that was supposed to go up, which would also increase aid to schools based on your property value and your students. I did include an estimated 1.81 wage expenditure increase and associated benefits. That is the Consumer Price Index urban rate that we are working with for July 1st. I also included the known 4.9% increase on health insurance premium beginning July 1st. We have received a 51% reduction in our Title I federal award, or approximately $125,000. That's been included in the preliminary budget, as well as the recently announced Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, which is a portion of the CARES Fund for public schools, and Holmen allocation is $209,000. So that has been included on both revenue and expenses with specific stipulations that will be attached to the use of those dollars. What is not included is in bold here. I just wanted to make sure that the board understands that I have not made assumptions on underspend yet. That's still being evaluated. Keep in mind, salary and benefits are over 70% of the budget in the general fund. And the board has agreed to pay out the contracts and assignments for fiscal or school year 1920. So we do anticipate that a large portion of this current fiscal year budget will be expended. That data is being assembled for review and will be brought back to the board, but know that there are not any assumptions on underspend. So when you're looking at June 30th, 2020 fund balance for general fund, it doesn't assume an underspend at this time. The general fund estimated revenue budget for 2021 is $50,302,000. The estimated expenditure budget is $49,843,000. The surplus, meaning expenditure revenue exceeds expenditures by about $460,000 in the preliminary budget. That sounds like a lot of money, but it's actually less than 1% of expenditures. And so it's important to understand how quickly that, that dollar amount could be taken away if there's a change in state aid. The estimated fund balance for a year from now is just about $15.5 million, which is almost 31%. This sets up the School District of Holmen very well going into this pandemic and future unanticipated expenditures, things we do not know could happen in the near future. So again, the preliminary budget does assume flat funding compared to 1920. It does not include additional decreases that we could see from a budget repair bill. At this time, we don't know what those would be. And it does include one of the reasons that the state aid is higher in 2021 is because of a one-time increase related to the debt service shared cost. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go through the summary budget. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation. That'd be good. Thank you. So I've already told you some of the assumptions that are in the budget. This first, I don't need to repeat those. The idea with the preliminary budget is to help create as much flexibility as possible with the surplus from 1920 and 21, reserving funds for one-time purposes rather than ongoing expenses that may not be sustainable. It is an unprecedented school year end, and there is a lot of growing pressure on staff, on students, on administration, and on the Board of Education, board leadership. And I think it's really important that we keep some flexibility in the budget and in fund balance reserves. I'm just going to go through the summary format, DPI summary format of the budget. You've seen this in the past, and it was provided not in a PowerPoint presentation, but in its full PDF version in the Google Drive for the board. So the first 8 lines of the DPI budget format include it starts with the general fund, and its general fund balance broken up. Oops, did I go? Yeah, broken up into the various types of fund balance: non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. And then columns 2 and 3 are the audited 18-19, the unaudited current year budget, because we are still in the current fiscal year, and then the preliminary for 2021. Line 8 is the total ending fund balance estimate. So if you look all the way to the bottom right corner, the estimated fund balance for June 30th, 2021 is $15,430,000. Next slide is the local sources of revenue for the general fund. Line 11 is the tax revenue, demonstrates a slight decrease over the 2019-20 tax revenue. The estimated general fund levy for 2021 is just over 13 million in Fund 10. Remember, this is dependent on student membership, revenue limit per pupil, and local authority to exceed the revenue limit. So if there's any changes made by the state regarding a revenue limit amount per pupil, this could alter the levy in the general fund. I've also decreased interest on investments. As everyone knows, you can't make too much money on your money right now, and so that number is decreased. And line 17 represents the local sources of revenue, estimated at 13.5 million for 2021. This next slide is the summary of state sources of revenue. Line 33 is the general state aid. This is where you will see an increase, estimated to increase to 31 million. And it's primarily a one-time increase. If you recall, when we were going out for referendum for the new high school addition and remodel, we talked about shared cost and how the state helps to pay for some of those costs when you go out for referendum. And that always happens, and happens in the year after. So for example, in 1920, in this current year, we have a relatively high debt service payment for principal and interest due. And it's the first year we're paying on that new debt for the addition and remodel. And you'll see that down, I'll point it out when we look at the debt service fund specifically. But we had over a $7 million principal and interest payment this year. It's a combination of previous bonded debt and the new debt coming on the books for the high school remodel and addition. And it was more front loaded, which means the payment this year is bigger than the payments in the following years on the debt service schedule. And because the debt service goes into the shared cost formula, we're seeing a larger state aid calculation for 2021 based on that debt service in 1920. And this is a good thing. It's a good timing for this to happen because it gives us additional flexibility and additional revenue from the state in 2021 that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have that referendum and the debt service come on the books for the high school project. Just a moment. So line 39 is the subtotal state sources estimated for 2021, totaling 34,474,000. So each of the categories above that in lines 32 through 38 are the different types of revenue from the state. If you look at line 38 and you compare the current year to next year, it goes from 3.3 million to down to 3 million. That line 38 or source code 690 other revenue, that included the Department of Justice safety grants for 2 years, and those grants are pretty much spent out and they will expire at the end of the year. And so you see a decrease in that revenue. And what's remaining in that line item is our per pupil categorical aid for 2021. Next is the federal sources of revenue in the general fund. Line 48, again, is your subtotal estimated at 477,000. Like I said earlier, this would include the decrease in the Title I allocation and the increase in the ESSER or emergency relief funding under the CARES Act for a increase in 2021 over current year, primarily based on that CARES Act. The total revenues for the general fund are estimated at 50.3 million. Next, we'll talk about the expenditures in the general fund. First is the instructional expenses, and line 66, subtotal of instruction, is $22.2 million. This includes anticipated increases in salary and benefits for instructional staff. It includes that increase in benefits for health insurance of 4.9% on premium for instructional staff. Also included in here would be all of the supply budgets, the substitute budgets for teachers and educational assistants. So it just represents the increase over the current year based on those assumptions. Next is the summary for support services. Line 76 identifies actually a decrease in total budget for support services down to 17.4 million. The primary line that you're looking at for the decrease is line 71, 250, its function 250,000 business administration. Most of our capital projects in the general fund are coded to this line item. So for many years now, we've had a district office addition and several 2-stage entries, and the safety and security referendums all were general fund expenses. And operating referendums for those projects, for the 2-stage entry projects and safety and security. And so that's why there's a decrease in that line item for next year, because we're almost done with those projects, and the only one remaining is the balance of the Viking 2-stage entry, and that will go into the 2021 budget year. This is a summary of the non-program transactions. So line 77 is an interfund transfer to special education, Fund 27. As a reminder, Fund 27 cannot go into a negative or a deficit position. And so each year we have to make a transfer from the general fund to Fund 27 to make it whole. And the estimated transfer for 2021 to that fund is a little over 6.1 million, line 77. The next line is open enrollment transfer. So this is the expenditure to other school districts that the state makes, and then we have to make an entry in our accounting based on resident students attending other school districts in Wisconsin. And so we anticipate that that will go up, not necessarily because of more enrollment out, but because in state statute, the dollar transfer per pupil is increasing. So in 1920, the transfer for a regular education student is $7,771. and for special education, it's $12,723. And the estimated transfer for next year is $8,125 for regular education and $12,977 for special education. So even if we don't have any more kids that open and roll out, the cost of the transfer is going up. This is a summary of total expenditures in the general fund, estimated at $49,842,745. And this just shows the three summary components: the revenue at the top, followed by expenditures, and then the slide that I started with the total estimated fund balance. So it's current year fund balance plus revenues for next year minus expenditures for next year equals the estimated fund balance for June 30th of 2021. I always like to include this slide. This is a chart that is in the annual district report. Reminder that it does lag by a year. So what was published last year was through 2017-18. The 2018-19 audited fund balance was just under 30% of expenditures. So you can see on this chart, 2 years prior, we were almost up to 26. And then last year, we were almost up to 30%. At that time, we were intentionally saving money to complete those two-stage entry products because we knew that the referendum from 3 years ago would have a shortfall once all the projects were coming to completion and to bid and completion. And so we were intentionally saving dollars in fund balance. So there has been an intentional growth, not only for the goal on fund balance, but also to save for those projects which are coming to conclusion soon. A reminder also is that fund balance is as of June 30th. It's an audited fund balance, assets less liabilities. It's not cash in the bank. So it's a snapshot in time of the available fund balance on the books for any given fiscal year. Next, I'm going to move on to special projects funds. In Holmen, in the School District of Holmen, we only have the Fund 21. This is our gift account. We have over 100 sub-accounts in Fund 21 for both curricular and co-curricular groups in the district. This fund accounts for gifts, donations, and fundraised dollars and the associated benefit or expenditures, excuse me. In 2021, Fund 21 will also include the student activity accounts previously reported in Fund 64. The gift accounts are allowed to carry over their balances on June 30th, and the revenue and expenditures are quite unpredictable because it does depend on fundraising efforts. So what happens is we reconcile at fiscal year end, and their carryover balance within each of those sub-accounts becomes their new budget for the following year. Because that's what they're allowed to spend is up to their carryover until they generate more revenue through fundraising efforts or gifts. So one thing to keep in mind here, again, there is not any estimates on how much we're not spending because of school closure in the spring. And so due to that closure, the actual carryover will most likely be higher than what is on the screen at this time because the students did not have the ability to fundraise or spend from March 13th through the end of the school year.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So Julie, you said next year the funds from the student funds will be going into that?
Right. So based on GASB 84, Government Accounting Standards Board 84, we are going to be required to move those previously recorded in Fund 64. I think we have about 5 of them, Cheryl, into Fund 21 because we are not truly fiduciary accounts because the advisors are very active in how those dollars are being spent. And so DPI is requiring that we move the monies into Fund 21. So they will still be segregated into those 5 sub-accounts, and they will still have their carryover, but they will be accounted for in Fund 21. We can't leave them in Fund 64 because they are not fully fiduciary, meaning students make all the decisions.
I was going to ask, so the other one.
That's in a nutshell the reason. So we will be reconciling their balances as of June 30th and moving them into Fund 21.
And in Fund 21, students have a say or have input?
Yes.
And technically they could spend down all the money for their group and then fundraise for it to replenish it, right?
Absolutely.
And is that what you see happen?
It depends on the group. Certain groups, we actually might prefer that they carry over some money. And an example there would be show choir, because show choir has a lot of expenses before their annual invitation, like in March, I think. And so they need some reserves that they can draw on up until their invitation, when they bring in, you know, the participation fees and attendance fees at the door for those that like to come to the show choir competition. So they're an example where it's really helpful if they carry over so that they have those dollars to spend in the fall as they participate in other competitions in other schools. So other accounts, like I said, there's well over 100. Some of them are pretty active and spend down. Ones that would typically carry over pretty decent balances would be DECA and show choir.
Okay, thank you. Other questions on that? Okay, keep moving. Thank you.
I think I almost jumped ahead. Sorry about that. Okay, so next is the Special Education Fund 27. And I just show revenue expenses here because it has to not have a deficit, and that's where I talk about transferring in from the general fund to keep them whole. So the Fund 27 does not end with the fund balance. Revenues and expenses equal each other, and we estimate that to be just over 9.2 million for 2021.
And what, can I just ask a quick question? What's driving that are district students, right? It's because I know at one time Holmen had a, you know, reputation for having great special needs programs. And so, you know, we wouldn't want to have to carry over that or have that kind of a pushover of balance or funds, general funds to that if it's driven by students out of district.
Yeah. When we determined our open enrollment guidelines, we always are ensuring that once we fill those seats in that now we close them. Okay. And you guys have, as a board, have been doing that, where that didn't always happen in the past.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the greatest variabilities, I think, Cheryl and the board within special education too, is student placement and the varying costs I'm talking about resident student placement. So every year can be a big swing on our expenses, for example, to Cholita or Catholic Charities, things like that. Never quite know what it's going to cost or what their services may need, or who will need the services. And so that can create some uncertainty in the general fund transfer to special education each year. As we've talked about in the past, other uncertainties include Medicaid reporting and funding within special education. So it is a budget and we try to work within it, but every year there can be some surprises, certainly within the special education fund. Debt service fund. So this is Fund 39, where we pay the principal and interest on bonds, on our government obligation construction bonds. We're down to, I think, just two. We have the one we just refunded, which was primarily the construction for Prairie View several years back, but just this spring we refunded the 2009 B series, it's called. And then we have the new debt for the high school addition and remodel, the 23.5 million from the 2018 referendum. And we just started paying on that debt schedule in 1920. So this is what I was talking about when I was referring to an increase in shared costs. So if you look at this, the unaudited 2019-20 numbers for debt service, and you go down to line 166, it's 7.2 million. That's the amount of long-term capital debt expenditures this year. If you look at the prior year, it was 2.6, and next year it's 4.4. So it's an anomaly. It's a kind of a front-loaded debt schedule, and it increases our shared cost that goes into the calculation for next year's aid from the state. So that is, I guess it's good timing as far as providing some additional flexibility in the general fund, but it's also what is really driving some of that increase in state aid as I proposed earlier in the budget. So for 2021, the revenue estimated for Fund 39, primarily levy source to pay the principal and interest due on the debt, is 4.4 million. And I'm sorry, yes, 4,375,000, and total expenditures is 4,439,000. The very bottom line, 173, reports on the indebtedness at the end of the year. And so by June 30th of 2021, the outstanding indebtedness principal due on bonds is $25,560,000. Next is the Capital Projects Fund. This is only for the construction of the high school addition and remodel. We started this, the expenditures and revenue expenditures in 2018-19. Primarily this year is the bulk of the expenditures at estimated 16.8 million. That can change. July 1, it depends on all the construction that's done by July 1 and that we're invoiced for, or as of June 30th, or what's going to fall into the 2021 fiscal year. So that's never quite perfect because it depends on the contractor and how they're invoicing us and the work completed by the end of the fiscal year. But we do estimate that the total expenditures for 2021 for the project are just over $6 million. Now this shows a fund balance in line 176. That is our current estimate. It can change quickly. We review change orders and bulletins. Sometimes it feels like several times a week with the contractors. So as we work between contingency and change orders and furnitures, fixtures, and equipment budgets, we keep narrowing down on anything that might actually be left over in fund balance. That being said, any resources remaining in the fund can only be used for the purpose for which the fund was established. In this case, the high school addition and remodel. And any resources that might be left over with in this fund when the project is finished must be transferred to the related debt service fund account. That means it would reduce debt service levy in a given year, and we'd use any leftover funds to help pay the principal and interest in that year on these bonds. So that's what would happen if there's any left over in Fund 42. Next is the food service fund. I've been working with Mike Gaspar, our school nutrition supervisor, to try to identify in this pandemic environment what school nutrition might look like based on the scenarios that Dr. Mueller shared earlier this evening. And there is a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in the delivery model and the costs associated with it. And so tonight, I share with you Mike's best estimates on revenue and expenses for 2021. He anticipates about almost 2.7 million in revenue and expending just over 3 million. So he is planning to have to use some fund balance based on what happens. And so again, it's very uncertain. One positive note is, and he's shared this with the board a couple times in the last 2 months, is that between grants and additional commodities revenues and the emergency food programs and extension through June 30th, he is confident, he feels like he will end the current year without going into a deficit position. And so hopefully he's beginning July 1st next fiscal year in a good place to weather some of the uncertainty coming forward. So lastly is the Community Service Fund. We reopened this fund in 1920 with about a $10,000 levy and related expenditures for the purposes of our consultant who's helping to develop, working with community partners and identify needs that we can help support at the new Holmen Area Boys and Girls Club. And so we have talked before about what will those needs look like. We don't have all that information for you yet, but we are planning to develop programming and levy $100,000 in community service revenue with corresponding expenditures of $100,000 in 2021. So this is still a work in progress. You know that we don't levy until the end of October, 1st of November through our annual meeting and budget hearing, but this is the current estimate on that budget for 2021. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Julie, I think you did a great job of explaining everything, and I guess I don't see any questions.
Thank you.
So thank you. And then the next item is that long-term capital improvement trust fund. And again, the budget is not on the agenda and won't be for until we have a better idea of what's going on, but that's just kind of use of where we're moving forward. We will be consenting on or considering this long-term capital improvement trust fund at the next meeting.
Okay. So Fund 46. Fund 46 is a long-term capital improvement trust fund. The authority for Fund 46 is in Wisconsin Statute 120.137. And I just want to share with you what a Fund 46 is and how it benefits a district. And why it's being recommended that the school board adopt or take action on a resolution to create a Fund 46. So a school board with an approved long-term capital improvement plan may establish a trust that is funded with a transfer from the general fund. The contribution from Fund 10 to Fund 46 is recorded as an expenditure for shared cost and equalization aid purposes. So it's recorded as an expenditure in the year it is transferred. Future expenditures from Fund 46 are not part of the shared cost because they were already part of the shared cost when they were transferred to 46. The school board is prohibited from removing the money deposited to Fund 46 for a period of the first 5 years from establishment. After the initial 5-year waiting period is over, funds may only be used for the purposes identified in an approved long-range capital plan. The Fund 46 assets may not be transferred to any other school district fund. One of the purposes of this fund is, or the purpose is to set aside funds for projects for approved long-term capital projects. So in the School District of Holmen, we have various sinking funds associated with operational referenda. but the sinking funds are often inadequate to complete the long-term capital projects that need to be done. And so this Fund 46 has actually been in discussion among administration for several years. And I feel it's important that we consider acting on bringing this into Holmen onto our books. And so that we have this tool available to us, not only to set aside funds, but other benefits that are also included. So the benefits of this Fund 46 are to provide a method to set aside funds, like I said. It does require a plan, which was also shared in the Google Drive. It may be used to level out expenses for shared costs. So rather than a large capital improvement project coming out of the general fund in one given year, it is, you can distribute, transfer each year into Fund 46 and accumulate those dollars for a larger project out of Fund 46 in the future. One of the other things that many districts are doing right now in the COVID environment, or at least planning around, and the uncertainty in the expenditures and the underexpending their budgets in 1920, are using the Fund 46 transfer to help level off shared cost for 2021. So again, you can only use the dollars for projects in approved capital improvement plan. It does require that the board establish the trust through resolution, and it also requires the creation of a segregated bank account. So that is the state's requirement to make sure that those dollars are segregated and that they're not tapped into for the first 5-year waiting period. And again, you can only use it for things in the plan. So our intent would be to bring updated plans to the board so that whenever we have the ability to use the dollars that are set aside after the 5-year waiting period, that those projects that are priority within the plan we would be able to, if we'd like to, use Fund 46 instead of the general operating fund during that time. As far as reporting on Fund 46, again, this would be my responsibility to report the minutes, official board minutes of the establishment of the fund, the signed resolution, and the documentation that a segregated bank account has been established with an initial deposit. In regards to initial deposit, I know have districts that have done like $1 just to get the clock ticking on that 5-year. Or maybe it's $1,000, or maybe it's $100,000, but it's a tool that they use to save for the future while spending down their current year budgets in order to maximize shared cost. So when thinking around what is a capital expenditure, there's just some bullet points for you to think about when you're looking at the plan. The plan that I shared with you is actually a spreadsheet maintained by John Daly, our supervisor of buildings and grounds. And it's a fluid document. It changes on occasion. You know, with the addition and remodel at the high school, there was actually a number of items on that document that John was able to eliminate and move other things up to priority because several of those capital improvements are being realized with the remodel at the high school. But capital expenditures, they endure and they're permanent in nature, typically outside of regular operational budgets, which is why it's been very challenging for John Daly and his budget or the principals of the schools trying to save enough annual allocation to meet greater capital permanent in nature type expenditures. So they're occasional, they're large, examples would include roof replacements, boiler replacements, parking lot, paving, not just the ceiling, but like having to redo concrete and parking lots and fields, things like that. So large, permanent in nature, expensive capital changes. Or it could be replacement of capital assets. Things that we intend to hold over a long period of time. Our capital threshold in the School District of Holmen, based on best practice, is $5,000. We're talking about a minimum of $5,000 for such things as equipment. Here we're talking about even larger expenses that would take a lot of an annual allocation in the operating budget in order to accomplish. And so they do require intentional saving for set aside dollars in capital improvement trust fund. So basic components of the plan itself should describe the nature of the improvement, where it's located, the cost estimate. I know that John is currently using like a current cost estimate because this plan is supposed to go out 10 years. I think he's added even a couple more years onto the plan, and we do not know what's going to cost in 10 to 12 years. So he uses a current cost in the plan. And then a timeline, estimated timeline of completion. Like I said earlier, some things get bumped up and they get reprioritized. That might be due to mandate or just because it depreciated faster than intended and we had to move it up for safety concerns. Or it's just more important than something else that can maybe be delayed another year. So a full resolution was provided in PDF format for you. This is just a snippet from that resolution. As Cheryl did indicate, this is for consideration. Not until the next board meeting in June are we asking for action on creating this trust. At that time, I would also bring forward an issue paper. And then as part of the fund balance designation, which comes at the end of June, I would present an estimate or recommendation on what would actually be transferred. The important thing to keep in mind, again, is that this is a tool. There isn't any required transfer other than an initial deposit to get the 5-year clock started. But it can be used to help save for the future for capital project funds while spending down current year operational budgets in order to maximize shared cost from state aid. Whoops. So again, the recommendation is asked for on 6/22. And year one funding would be presented at that time. Do you have any questions? I'm not sure. I feel like I didn't explain that really, really well. It's just something we've been thinking about. Jay Clark and Chris Mueller and I have been thinking about for some time. And it's a tool that a lot of districts in this environment of uncertainty, several around us actually started this clock ticking, and they may be able to take advantage of this next year already by spending some of their dollars out of the capital trust fund and freeing up some money that might have been designated for a capital project in the operating fund 10 for other unknown things because of the pandemic. And so we don't have that choice in the next year, but we don't want to really prolong establishing this tool for future use so that we have that at hand in case we need to use it in the future.
So are there questions?
Yes. So Julie, am I understanding correctly that if we save for a capital improvement and then for whatever reason that capital improvement either priority changes, we need the money for a different one first or something like that, that we have some flexibility there in terms of timeline or even project?
Right. As long as it's on the approved plan by the board, then we can use those dollars to do any of the improvements within the plan.
Okay.
What we couldn't use it for was just something new that wasn't in an approved plan.
Okay. And then second question is, does this streamline things a little bit for you? Or does this become something additional you have to manage? Like, do you find that this makes managing those funds more streamlined, or is it more cumbersome?
It'll be an extra transfer each year, Fund 46 and the separate checking account transfer. But I think that is minor compared to the need district-wide to save for these items.
Okay, good.
For example, like at the high school, they may want to save for a project, but they don't really have enough carryover to save for a capital project. Or John Daly's budget often is spent or overspent because there's not enough to do everything he needs to do and put out some fires sometimes to meet those needs in his current operating budget. So if we can set it aside like we do in our home budgets for replacement of major capital equipment or capital projects, then there's that ability to draw from Fund 46 for those projects specifically and not continue to stress Fund 10 in that given year. So if we, for example, were to put away, let's say $1,000, that's minor, but if we do $1,000 for 5 years, that shared cost is distributed over 5 years. That helps the general fund budget. And then those dollars are saved in Fund 46 for capital purchases or projects down the line. We often look, as you know, at our year end. Every year we go through a process of un and underfunded needs. We bring that to the board. And there's a lot of things on there. And we only get to them if we underspend our budget. And then we start looking at that list to see what else we can tackle. So this would be another tool to be able to help tackle some of those that are specific to capital project need. Saving for big projects.
Thank you.
So I want to follow up on Barb's question though. If something came up like the 2-stage entry and it wasn't part of our capital improvement and we could be sitting with $1 million in that new fund, but now we are Viking 2-stage entry is much higher than what was anticipated. Where would the money come from to do the Viking 2-stage entry if it wasn't identified as one of the projects in the long range?
Sure. In that case, it probably come from fund balance in the general fund, just as it is right now. So those, to me, that might be an unanticipated capital need versus we know certain buildings are going to need a new roof because the life expectancy is 20 to 25 years, or we know certain boilers are going to need replacement because they're nearing 50 years old. The Viking example is because the referendum was short the actual need and the bids, but it doesn't mean we won't retain reserves in the general fund. It just means that we are intentionally setting aside for capital projects rather than assuming there'll be money left over to do those because the annual allocations don't meet the need for the capital expenditures.
I just have a concern about designating in fundraising world and nonprofit world when things are restricted. And we've seen some nonprofits sit with large fund balances that can be only used for A, but now B has come up and they can't use those funds because they've been restricted for something else. And the flexibility, I would just worry about something coming up that we didn't identify, and it's gonna have to come out of the general fund then. And so it's gonna come out of instruction and those kind of things. And it may come out of the fund balance, but we have that flexibility in that fund balance now to do it. So that would be my only concern that I would express at this point in time. That if we're doing that plan, the long range plan, I think we need to be as generic as possible. So when you say the roof, do we have to identify which roof, or can it just be roofing? Or
you have to identify location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just worry about that. That it would be my only, and then will there be expectation that every year we put X number of dollars out of the total budget aside.
I anticipate that the transfer would be the same every year. And I don't anticipate that it would ever be fully funded to match the 10-year plan.
No.
So I can't see that we'd ever be able to afford that for a long time, but it would be set aside specific for those projects, but it would never fully fund the projects, most likely. But it does then free up in a given year, being able to reallocate Fund 10 resources, for example, and say, okay, John, now this year you can do that project, but it's going to come out of Fund 46 so that we can use that 50,000, 100,000 to reallocate for this need that's a priority in the general fund. And again, it is a tool for shared cost for aides. So if you've been around Wisconsin school funding, you know that the more we spend out our anticipated budget in the general fund, the greater the shared cost is on aid the following year. And so several districts are worried that that's going to impact them negatively next year. I'm less worried about that because I know that we have that additional shared cost coming from the debt service increase current year. Would it be more? Potentially. We'll just have to get closer to the end of June to get a better idea. So
if we deposit it into Fund 46, it can be looked at as if we spent it versus
Exactly.
if it's held in a fund balance,
Exactly.
it can't.
correct.
Right.
Okay, well, that makes a big
That's,
difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's more of the intention of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Phew.
So then we will move on to the consent agenda items for this evening. We only have 3. And one of them, I will remind you, is the alma mater for the Holmen School District in honor of the class of 2020. Unless there's anything that people would like to have pulled out separately, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Anita, and I think I saw Rebecca put her hand in there. So a motion's been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, then moving on to board reports. If you have any comments or anything you'd like to add this evening, or did you have something, Chris?
I just have one thing tonight that I wanted to share. We have a retirement from Diane King. She's been with our district for 10 years, and I just wanted to thank her for her service. She's worked in our nutrition services department, and then recently she was over at the print shop at the high school, working her heart out over there, keeping all of our staff happy with their printing. But then she has impacted so many families and students through her assistance through our FFA program. And just want to thank her for all that she's done for our students and for the staff in the School District of Holmen. So thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank you for remembering to do that. Okay, then moving on to board reports. Chris Lau, did you have anything for this evening?
I do not know.
Okay, Rebecca Reber?
I do not.
Okay, Barb Wetstein?
Just congratulations, Trenton. You're a senior.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Wopat?
I'd like to, as a parent, express my appreciation for the different scenarios that were published for the community. It's just nice because the kids keep asking what the fall is going to look like, and nobody really knows what it is, but at least it was nice to have those conversations based on that video. So thank you for putting that out there.
Thank you. And then Trenton?
Not too much, no.
Nothing to, okay. And then Gary Dunlap?
I have nothing.
Okay, and I just have a quick reminder of the meeting on the 15th. It's a board workshop in Trenton. We'd really like to have you come and participate in that. It's kind of a looser meeting where we have a lot of discussion. It's really focusing around 3 items. And I know that one of the items was the back to school scenario. So if there's any updates, Dr. Mueller will share any of those kind of updates with us. But then we were going to also look at the board, what do we call it? Norms, the board
Operational.
norms, and review those and just go over a few things. It's for the newer members, and even for the old timers, to just remind us what happens if somebody approaches you and they have a concern, and how are you supposed to respond in those kind of cases, and what's the protocol, and then also talking about board meetings and those things, which is really out the window because we're not together, so it's kind of hard, but we'll talk about those as we prepare to come back together. And then the final thing is the mission, vision, and the work that they've been doing behind the scenes. I know that will help drive committees. So when we look at what they're coming out with and what the focus areas are, that will help drive what the board committees will be. And so then as we organize for the fall, we'll take that information and ask folks for their interest in board committees, and we'll then do the assigning from there. So we really won't do that until July sometime. So anyway, just wanted to make sure, and I don't know, Dr. Mueller, if other staff, I think we're just going to keep it small because of the space we have here, but it'll just be a great time for us to meet in person. So bring your masks, have your masks available, but we will be seated 6 feet away. So otherwise, I don't have anything else. There is a closed session. Anita Jagodzinski, you want to read the closed? Yes?
I don't have any comments. You skipped me.
I did, because my name was
before
this list, so sorry. I'm usually last.
You're usually so good about it.
Oh, well, anyway, so just a reminder, yes, the next meeting is the 15th. The 22nd is the formal board meeting, and then we have 2 meetings in July. And my anniversary is one of them. That's fun. And then the 25th is graduation. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about that too. So, so Anita Jagodzinski, if you would mind reading the closed session motion.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby moves to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, in this case, analysis of individual district positions, including contract terms and compensation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Got it. Second by Gary. Okay. Anita, would you do the roll call, please?
Yes. Chris Lau.
Yes.
Rebecca Reber.
Yes.
Barb Wettstein.
Yes.
Brian Wopat.
Yes.
Gary Dunlap.
Yes.
Cheryl Hancock.
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Okay, we will be in closed session in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
We'll allow Dr. Mueller. So sign off and get on the other link, and goodbye, Brian and Trenton.